Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last week of the course, week five. Our unit five is called Giving. And the centerpiece of this week is something that Peter Singer says in Famine, Affluence, and Morality. Very, very simple argument, very challenging argument. And that argument, which has a premise and a conclusion, that it's really what is at issue this week. Singer starts, as we'll see, with a very simple principle, and that is that we regard suffering and death from lack of access to nutrition, clean water, and shelter as a very bad thing. Somebody's dying because, or dies because they don't have enough to eat, or they don't have shelter, or they don't have clean water to drink, then we regard that as a very bad thing. And we can all basically agree with that fundamental principle. The second principle is where things get controversial, and that is the second principle is that if we can prevent something very bad from happening without giving up anything of comparable moral significance, then we should do so. Now, we'll see that that second principle comes crucially in Singer in two different versions, but that's, I think, the most favored version of it. That is, if I can prevent something very bad from happening to someone without myself incurring any hardship or evil that is of comparable moral significance, then I ought to do it. For instance, if I see somebody who is bleeding on the subway platform, laying there bleeding to death, and I can help them with first aid, and the only burden that I accrue is being late for work. Well, being late for work, you'll see that in ethical analysis 4. Then I should do it, because being late for work, however it may be a bad thing for me, it's certainly not as bad as somebody bleeding to death. So that sort of thing is what he has in mind. Obviously, what he has in mind is if I can give up some of my luxuries in life, like books and new clothes and things like that, things I don't really need, for the purpose of preventing other people starving to death, then I should do so. And then the question becomes, how much should I be willing to give up? And that's where things get controversial. It's a very simple argument, has a simple premise. This is bad. We all agree. And second principle, if we can prevent something very bad from happening without sacrificing anything of either comparable moral importance or even any moral importance, we should do so. Singer's idea is that if we actually lived by the implications of these two principles, then not only our own lives individually, but the whole world would be transformed. So that's really the center of this week. And Arthur's response to it is actually quite important too. Arthur can be construed as drawing limits to that. You might think of Singer as a strict utilitarian. All he's doing really is trying to live by, or ask us to live by, the greatest happiness principle, or what Mill might have called in later chapters the greater happiness morality. And Arthur, like a lot of people, thinks that you have to draw limits to that. That is, that at a certain point, the demands of the greatest happiness morality perhaps become unreasonable. And we find that there are other considerations that need to be taken into account. So, really, this week is about giving. It's about how much we should be willing to sacrifice to help others. That's what the Jane scenario in ethical analysis 4 is really getting us to think about what Jane owes to this little boy the stranger who's asked for her help, and what she should be willing to sacrifice, and whether it'd be reasonable for her to sacrifice what would be necessary to help him, and things like that. So really, this is about giving this week, and about perhaps drawing the limits to how much and what we should give.